I'm Rhonda Wepler. I'm an artist in residence at the Museum of Arts and Design here in New York City, and I've been making some art projects here on my dining table for the past few weeks.
I often make sculptures from everyday materials, like the sculpture of a dandelion made from a beer can I found. This series of tutorials will show you how to use materials from your kitchen and home to make gifts that fit in a standard size envelope to mail to friends and family. This episode's project was inspired by this miniature glass bowl from Iraq made in the 2nd to 3rd century AD. These little bowls are the perfect gift for anyone who loves both salt and recycling. Here are the materials you'll need for this project. Please pause the video here to get a closer look. The plastic we will be recycling is high-density polyethylene plastic, or HDPE plastic. Here's what I found in my apartment that is made of HDPE plastic. It seems to be mostly a non-shiny, non-transparent plastic. There are many interesting tutorials online of people making things using melted HDPE plastic. This project is based on what I learned from the tutorials and also seeing what I could do in a New York apartment. Make sure you only use HDPE for this project. Other plastics may be toxic to melt. HDPE plastics will have the number 2 in the triangular recycling sign and often also have the letters HDPE on them. For this project, you will need some colorless translucent HDPE like the type from this milk jug. I use small scissors, wire cutters, and big scissors to cut the plastics. Each tool is helpful for different thicknesses and sizes of plastic. To cut into a bottle, you'll first have to pierce it with a box cutter knife. Then continue with scissors. Cut the big pieces into strips. Then the strips into tiny pieces. It is better to always include some of these translucent, colorless pieces as they become clear when heated, acting like a temperature gauge. Collect the pieces into bags, separating the colors, but also have a bag for a favorite festive color mix. These are all the parts we will be cutting and shaping. We will be using 3 extra small, that's 7.5 fluid ounce or 221 milliliter pop cans to make the mold for our bowl. This part will work as a stencil to trace on parchment paper. Wear an old pair of gloves to protect your hands from the sharp edges. This part will keep plastic pieces from falling all over the toaster oven. This will press down on plastic to smush it together. These 2 parts will act as the top and bottom of our mold. A tab on the side of the bottom will help open the mold. To make the bottom of the mold, cut 2 1.5-inch high cups from a can. To cut into the cans, first start with a box cutter knife. Now use scissors to continue that cut. Clean the can if there's any residue left, as it will leave stains on your bowl. Trim any little shards off so they do not cut your fingers later. Cut slits around the cup that are about 1 inch deep and 1/2 inch wide. Bend these back towards the outside of the can. Cut one section deeper to allow room for the second can to squeeze in, and also to provide the tab. Next, make the ring that keeps plastic from falling around the oven. First, trim the edge of the can so it is nice and straight. Place the can on a cutting buffer or board and pierce inside 1/2 inch down from the rim. Using scissors, cut along to make a ring, removing any shards at the end. To make the stencil for the parchment paper, just straighten the leftover top piece of a cut can. To make the top of the mold, cut another 1.5 inch high cup, the same as the first cup made for the bottom of the mold. However, this time bend the sections inside the can instead of outside, and there will be no need for a tab. Test the top and bottom fit, and that they can pull apart. This bottom piece will be multi-purpose. It will hold the cast bowl in shape while making the foot, and also act as a stencil to trim the bowl, as well as a press to flatten melting plastic. For this, cut out the bottom of a third can. The last tool I later realized would be helpful is the simple cutter made of a strip of aluminum that has been rolled up and clipped with a metal clip to create a circle that is about 3/4 inch wide. Be sure to totally clean your table as soon as you are done, as the shards left are very small and sharp. You will need to trace the can stencil on some translucent colorless plastic with a permanent fine marker. Cut out and be sure to trim off all the ink so it doesn't mar your bowl. Trace the stencil can on a piece of parchment paper using a thin permanent marker. Cut this circle out, making sure that you cut out all the black marker as it could transfer to your plastic later. You will need a second circle of parchment paper if you want a foot on your bowl. Trace the cutout bottom of the can first. Then cut out, again removing all the black ink. Here is a bowl without a foot. It works fine enough and for sure fits in a standard size envelope to mail. This is the same bowl with the foot added. Adding a base makes it a bit more stable, but is more challenging to craft. To protect your hands, use an old pair of fabric gloves. Oven mitts are too bulky for this project. Gather everything you will need and have it ready by the toaster oven. You need to be able to move quickly in and out of the oven, so I'm not sure if a conventional full-size oven would work. HDPE plastic melts at a low temperature, only 325 degrees Fahrenheit, which is less than what cookies bake at. It doesn't emit toxic fumes at this temperature, but it's tricky keeping it hot and manipulating it as it hardens within seconds of it being out of the oven at this temperature. I keep it at 325 degrees, but then lean it a bit towards 350 degrees, and try to keep the oven door closed as much as possible to keep the heat in. First, lay the ring on a foil-lined tray. If you plan to make a foot for your bowl, turn the top piece of your mold over and place it on the tray. This will act as a crucible. Fill the bottom of the ring with your colorful plastic mix with one even layer. Fill the crucible with plastic bits. Here I am recycling some test melts. HDPE can be melted numerous times, and it seems to work still fine. As you can see, the white translucent milk bottle plastic turns clear when fully melted. This is a handy way to see how hot the plastic has become. When the milk bottle plastic is clear, remove the ring, cover with a larger parchment paper circle, and flatten with a silicone spatula. You can leave the paper in the oven, but it's easier to see if the plastic is melted if you take it off. My toaster oven cycles through the elements being red hot and then turning off to maintain the temperature. Try to open the door only between red hot cycles to keep the heat in. Place the small circle of parchment paper on the crucible and pat down with a spatula. You can also use the aluminum bottom to compress the crucible bits down. Once the bottom layer of the plastic bits has melted, place the milk jug circle on top. It will turn clear once melted. Place the parchment circle on top and squish with a spatula. Note that I'm doing this all in the oven and not taking the tray out. This is so that the plastic doesn't cool off, as it stiffens almost immediately once out of the oven. Also note that the plastic never liquefies. It will only ever turn into a rubbery putty type consistency. I'm basically just squishing the pieces together so that they fuse, and so that air between the pieces is being squished out. Once the bits in the crucible have generally turned into one blob, remove from the toaster oven. HDPE shrinks down as it melts. Sprinkle with a layer of milk jug plastic where bare spots have appeared, around the edges of the circle mostly. Look for major holes and make sure to cover. Now that the plastic and the crucible has cooled, it will pop out of the aluminum. Place it back in the oven on the foil. Squish down the milk jug pieces layer once it has melted. Squish down the dumped out crucible plastic so it's flat. Add colorful bits on top of the fused milk jug layer. Add extra where any holes have appeared. Only build up your bowl in about 4 layers. Any thicker and it may not work. Melt these pieces in, squash, then allow the crucible plastic to melt completely. Take the tray out of the oven. Use the small circular cutter made earlier to punch a circle out of the crucible plastic while it is still very hot. You will have to press hard to cut through the plastic. It will quickly start to harden. Once it has clouded up, it will peel off the aluminum foil. It will still be very hot, so make sure you're still wearing your gloves. Pull the plastic off of the cutter, and in the groove left by the cutter, use a pair of scissors to start cutting it out. If the plastic cools too much so you cannot cut it, you can put it back in the oven and then cut it again. Now that the bowl has been out of the toaster oven and clouded up a bit, look for any bare areas and layer up with pieces. Also add any color pieces to compose the pattern to your liking. Place back into the oven to melt and fuse the added pieces. For this final fusing, squish down really hard so that all the pieces smooth together. It won't smooth anymore once in the mold. Now remove the piece from the oven and allow it to cool slightly. Using the parchment paper as a guide, use a pair of scissors to cut any pieces off that stick oddly out around the circle. It doesn't have to look perfect, this is good enough here. Center the plastic circle in the bottom of your mold and place back in the oven. Put both the top and bottom of your mold in the oven as they need to be equally hot. I couldn't hold the camera and do the next step, so I'm mocking it here outside the oven. Once the plastic looks completely melted, take the whole tray out of the oven. Place the top of the mold over the plastic and press down all in one go, very firmly. You will need a pot holder for the final push. HDPE plastic needs to be cast under pressure like this. It wants to shrink, so if left without pressure, it will shrink unevenly and warp and wrinkle tremendously. Part of the problem is that it cools unevenly when different parts are thicker than others, tugging on itself as it shrinks. Putting the mold back in the oven and turning it off while the bowl cools will help even out the cooling and shrinking process. Once the mold has cooled down to room temperature in the closed oven, you can open it up. I'm wearing gloves so I don't cut myself on the sharp edges. It's not hot. It may have some flaws like this. You can fit tiny pieces of milk jug plastic in the hole and then let it melt during the next step. Place the bowl into the aluminum can bottom dish so it doesn't lose its shape. Allow it to melt only enough for the plastic to soften, using a spatula to smooth out the patched bits a bit. Avoid letting the whole bowl melt. Take out of the oven and cut along the lip you see here while the bowl is still warm. The bowl is done at this point. If you want to add a base, place the base on the smaller circular piece of parchment. This will help you center the base on the bowl later. Allow the base to almost completely melt. Place the bowl face down on the can bottom in the oven and heat for about 5 minutes. You don't want the bowl to melt at all, just get it hot enough so it will fuse to the base. Make sure the base is very melted and take the tray out. Center the base face down on the bowl and pat lightly. Take your time centering, which is a bit of a challenge. Quickly turn the bowl over and push down on the center of the bowl to help flatten the base and to fuse the bowl to the base. Make sure the oven is off and allow the bowl to cool in the oven completely. It's finally done! It can be used to hold a favorite piece of jewelry or as a pinch bowl for fancy salt, or combine it with a matching spoon from the previous episode. This little bowl is going out to my friend Michelle. She has a food blog called Mint Green Apron and also loves to recycle. She lives in Steveston, British Columbia. A special thanks to Mike at Atomic Shrimp for his informative online HDPE melting tutorials documenting his attempts to make a boat out of recycled plastic.
Well, thanks for watching. Next time I'll be making scented roll-up birthday cake cards. Stay safe out there.